Nostalgia's a funny thing, isn't it? It's a hard thing to describe. I mean, yes, it does have a dictionary definition, but those rose-colored glasses you see things through, and that feeling you get in your chest when that wave of nostalgia hits you is just, it's so hard to put into words. But it probably goes a little something like this.
I don't have it, you fucking.
This is the way the world ends.
If none of that hit you at all, congrats. You are not just like me for real. Okay, so where am I going with this? Clearly this video isn't titled, nostalgia bait. If it was, I'd just sit back, stop talking, and make more montages. No, this video is all about why you should start with prequels. And nostalgia plays a pretty big part in the counter argument to my point, which is why I wanted to put it right in your face, front and center first. So keep that in mind and we'll get back to the role nostalgia plays a little bit later on. So let's start with what prequels actually are. Typically they fall into one of two categories or sometimes both of these categories. Prequels are usually made as either fan service or a new starting point for people to get into a series, where literally anyone who doesn't know a single thing about said series can jump in with the least resistance and most modern iteration possible. This can help the series reach a broader audience and continue to grow, which is why when trying to get into a larger series spanning many years, sometimes being even older than you are, you will probably be best starting with a prequel. And to be crystal clear, this isn't some strict hard and fast rule, okay? It won't always apply. But from my experience, say roughly 8 or 9 times out of 10, you are going to have a far better experience starting with a prequel than you would have had if you started with the original of a series. Because by the time a prequel rolls around, whether the old school die-hard fans want to admit it or not, it will more than likely be far more refined than the original, have far more quality of life improvements than the original, and the series by then more than likely will have really come into its own. Now yes, alright, I hear what you're saying. There are quite a few drawbacks and caveats to this. For example, prequels can, at times, spoil what's going to happen in the main overarching story. However, that doesn't change the fact that starting with the right prequels can set you up to have a far better experience with the series than you ever would have had to start with. Well, let's think about it for a second. If you were to start with the original Mobile Suit Gundam from 1979, you might just get bored and drop it and never make your way through the rest of the series. And I wouldn't blame you. The original Mobile Suit Gundam is really rough to get through. And because you started like that and dropped the series, you'd never make it all the way through to see the phenomenal prequel like Gundam The Origin, or experience other phenomenal side stories like War in the Pocket, all because the original just does not stand up to modern standards. And I know in Gundam talk, The Origin is technically an alt universe and not an official prequel to, the original Mobile Suit Gundam, but it easily fits into the UC timeline and can be watched before the original Mobile Suit Gundam to no real detriment. That's even how I actually started the series a few years back and how I recommend everyone else watch it too, even though yes, it can spoil a couple things. When I say something is keeping up with the modern standard, that doesn't necessarily mean it had to have come out in the last, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's just that comparatively to an original, a prequel is always going to be a more modern take. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a prequel. It would be the original. You get what I'm saying? A prequel, when done right, should be giving you a far better experience than the original ever could, like, parents try to do for their kids, and will act as a way to get you excited for what's to come and help you to appreciate that overarching story going forward a lot more, rather than dropping it right from the start because you got bored. I mean, that in and of itself is part of the purpose of a prequel, to show off all the new cool stuff you can do, whether that be fancy animation, new graphics or game design, or even all new fully sick special effects. Yeah, alright, maybe the prequels weren't so good in this particular regard. I told you it wasn't a hard and fast strict rule. But when all of that cool new stuff amalgamates and comes together, it creates a brand new entry point where any prospective fan can start, get excited, and most importantly, get invested. Once you're invested in a series, it's just a snowball effect. It becomes so much easier to get over any future hurdles, whether that be how much something has aged, how bad it looks, the pacing, the crappy fight scenes, all of those little things that could deter a first-time viewer suddenly become a much easier pill to swallow. Meaning that even some 15-year-old Fortnite kid who could not give a single fuck about appreciating old media and all of its little quirks could still sit back and appreciate what a series has to offer if they got invested into it right from the start with a prequel that was a little bit more modern and didn't alienate them. And that doesn't just extend to 15-year-old Fortnite kids either, that extends to myself as a 23-year-old, and it even extended to my fiance. A couple of months back, I tried to do a couch co-op playthrough of Halo with her after we finished It Takes Two. Awesome game, by the way. So naturally, I decided to start with, the original Halo Combat Evolved, which was the biggest mistake I could have made. She just could not get into the original Halo because it was old and clunky and had blocky looking graphics. All of these things that were just such non-issues in my eyes were things that she just couldn't look past and really affected her enjoyment of the game. And as soon as I gave up while I was ahead and booted up Reach, we ended up having a far better experience. And yes, there is an argument for a generational whiplash going from a more modern title to something quite a bit older. But again, once someone gets invested into a series, it becomes far less of an issue. And I know not everyone is going to feel this way, especially with a game as renowned as Combat Evolved. But I think this really opens us up nicely into the role that nostalgia plays in all of this. When someone takes even the slightest interest in something we love, we can't help but want them to love it as much as we do. And what better way is there to do that than to take them on that same journey you went through to make you love this thing in the first place? The only problem with that is it's not 1979 anymore, and it's definitely nowhere near close to 2001 anymore either. Times have changed and games and media have evolved so much that people have far different expectations than you did when you first experienced this thing all those years ago. Little quirks that you'd gloat about as charm could genuinely deter someone from getting into a series. You really gotta understand that whether you realize it or not, you are always going to look at the things you're fond of with these rose-colored glasses because you're nostalgic. All the experiences and memories you have with that series will impact the way you perceive it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We all have so many fond memories from old things we used to do, old games we used to play, whatever it may be. But just because you love something and are nostalgic for it doesn't make that thing objectively good to everyone. So you need to be mindful of the fact that not everyone is going to see these flaws and quirks the way that you do. And a lot of people might just not feel the same way about a game you do at all, because at the end of the day, they're not you, and they weren't there by your side experiencing these things with you. I know it can be a hard pill to swallow, but just don't get all gatekeepy when people try to start series with prequels, especially if they're good ones, because sometimes it's just the better option. Unless, of course, it's a fucking awful prequel like any of these. And with all of that being said, start with Gundam The Origin, start with Halo Reach, and start with Yakuza 0. Those are the main three I could think of off the top of my head. And that is the whole reason I made this video. My 60-second how to watch Gundam, everyone would always comment, why would you start with The Origin? Why would you start with the prequel? Blah, blah, blah. This whole video, I'll link it in the description of that. This is why you start with Gundam The Origin, this is why you start with prequels, if they're good. Thanks for watching.